Robot Commando is here to help you. He's your one-man army. No enemy can destroy him. He fights off, yes, hurls missiles one after another. Even an Oxina can't stop him. Robot Commando fires his secret weapon. He takes orders from no one except you.
Forward!
Robot Commando is here to help you. Look for your Robot Commando. He's looking for you.
What's good, everyone? You got Mind Circus here with you, and welcome to another Mind Over Meta open world build. And today we're going to be looking at a bit of a surprise. As I mentioned in the title, I wasn't supposed to like this. We will be looking at Celestial Mechanist. Before we get started, if you are new to the channel, new to Guild Wars 2, just haven't done so yet, I am currently farming likes and subscribes in an effort to build the channel. If you want to hook me up with one of those just below the video, that would be fantastic. So, when it all comes to where this spec fits in, this is obviously our Engineer main class and our Ranger subclass for Guild Wars 2. It is a pet spec, and I have, at many times in the past, expressed my opinion, so to speak, on pet specs as being just not my cup of tea, not my jam. But this one really is a lot of fun. It's at times more interactive, and if you want to play it simply, actually is everything that people quote-unquote love about Ranger. And I'm not talking about Ranger, obviously, at higher levels. I'm talking about the open world longbow pew-pew. This is absolutely a better alternative than that. I will be very clear about that. You know, not to cast any further aspersions on Ranger. But this is an absolutely better alternative for open world play, particularly if you are the kind of player that jumps into the occasional meta or a group event. This build brings so much to the party, and we will definitely take a look at that. The build can handle pretty much everything you throw at it, including the usual selection of open world events. But honestly, what I was looking for here was a very simple, very easy to play build that could perma-alacrity on a group while still comfortably farming Jadeite and Dragon's End with my cat on my lap. That was actually the test on this one. Now, that's not to say that's the only thing I did with it. I did a lot of testing on this. We'll get into some options that I came up with. But essentially, this is where it came out. It's easy, fun, provides great group benefit in open world metagroups, and this particular variant brings a fair bit of damage to the party. I've seen a few Mechanist builds out there that focused on the tankier aspects of the class. This is going to bring a fair bit of damage to it. So let's take a look at building gear. So our equipment here is going to be 100% Celestial armor and trinkets. Looks like I've left the wrong stats on my legendary amulet. Let me go ahead and test that. I tested a few different setups. So we are on Celestial here at this point, 100% Celestial. If you'll look, I am running Renegade runes. We'll talk about the runes in a second. As far as weapons go, I am running the mace, and I am running pistol. Shield is another option. Again, we'll talk a little bit about the options right now. In the weapons, the sigils are pretty much non-negotiable, running a strength and a bursting sigil in there for the DPS increases. Again, this is probably not anything that's kind of foreign to anybody, but if you're a newer player to the game, we will get might when we critically hit a foe. This will start stacking might for us as we are fighting, and we are using a bursting sigil, which is increasing our condition damage. Now, let's take a look at the runes. The runes, there are going to be a few different options, so I just want to talk to you about these. I tested a number of different runes in this one, and eventually came to the realization that the spec is best played for Condi. You can obviously play it for power. If you are going to play, say, the rifle or a different weapon, you may take a look at speccing it for power, but specifically if we're talking about the mace does a lot of conditions on it, so we definitely want to keep this in mind here. So with that in mind, I went ahead taking a look at the runes. In terms of damage, the best overall rune was the Renegade rune. Now, there were some very specific edge cases on this where perplexity runes actually outdamaged the Renegade runes, but I do want to put in front of you that those I don't think were enough to invest in the cost of perplexity runes, which I think are absolutely outrageous. The Renegade runes, about a gold and some change, and that's it off the TP. You can get the Renegade runes significantly cheaper in World vs. World. That is something you may want to take a look at if you are a World vs. World player. A few badges of honor, or I think it's the testimonies of heroics or something to that effect. Will mitigate a lot of the cost of these runes, so you can get those in World vs. World. That said, if you are not playing World vs. World, I think the best place to get these is just to grab them off the TP really quickly. They're not going to kind of go to a crazy price because of the ability to buy them and then resell them from World vs. World. So we got our Renegade runes. Other runes I tested here, I tested Nightmare runes. Nightmare runes ended up in objectively being the worst of the Condi DPS runes. That said, you do have at least one other option than the Renegade runes. We'll talk about this really quickly. You could actually run Firebrand runes on this build. Now, the Firebrand runes will give you absolutely nothing on the 6. It's important to keep that in mind. Obviously, if we look at Firebrand runes, what we're getting here is condition damage and some boon duration. It's a quick way to get boon duration. If you've got the runes sitting around and you don't have Renegade runes, and for some reason don't want to put the Renegade runes in there, it's something to think about. It is the best DPS choice that actually also kept up a little bit of boon duration. But that said, there is a lot of waste going on these because this build does not generate quickness. So that is one thing to keep in mind. That said, the damage off these runes was not awful. So that is, something to keep in mind. And we do have the ability to, generate some burning around us. I'm not going to recommend these runes, but we'll talk a little bit about boon duration when we get into the gameplay section. So overall speaking, big fan of the Renegade runes. I believe the Perplexity, the Nightmare, and the Firebrand runes are the ones I just wanted to touch on really quickly. And I think that the only real alternative is probably the Firebrand runes. Now, the Firebrand runes don't, kill our DPS by very much, but again, we're only going to use them in a very specific kind of situation that we will speak to in the gameplay section. So that there is our build, our gear. When it comes to our build, we're going to be running firearms, we're going to be running inventions, and we are going to be running Mechanist. With firearms, we will be running chemical rounds, gain condition damage. Your pistol skills gain increased condition duration. That's part of the reason why we're running pistol on this. You could also run shield in here. Shield wasn't awful. It wasn't a very good DPS variant, but it was a really, really good kind of, sustainy variant with a little bit of CC. And CC may be one of the things that the build, as I'm going to give it to you, may be lacking. Taking a look at our next one, we got Thermal Vision, gain expertise. This is condition duration, increase your outgoing condition damage when you inflict burning. you're starting to see where we're going with this, and we're also going to be running modified ammunition, which is increased strike damage for each condition on a foe. Now, options here, we obviously wouldn't be taking Juggernaut. We're not going to be taking the Flamethrower. We could go with Incendiary Powder here. I'm going to be honest with you, I tried both of these. They were one as good as the other, so it's up to you on that one. The build itself is not generating a ton of might. It kind of wavers around 21 to 24 stacks of might at any given point, so it's important to keep that in mind. That said, if you're going to be playing with somebody who is generating might for you, you know, that does kind of change what you're going to do here. Looking at inventions, we'll be running automated medical response. Heal skills are recharged when you are struck below the health threshold. This is a bit of a win, and is really there because the other options are not that great. We will be using Mecha Legs. Mecha Legs is a movement speed increase. It also kills the duration on things like Cripple, Chill, and Immobilize. You will find that the EoD zones make very liberal use of Cripple and Immob, so this becomes a much more important kind of trait, particularly as we are heading into EoD. And the last trait that we'll be using is Medical Dispersion Field, which is a percentage of healing you apply to yourself is shared with nearby allies. Looking down at Mechanist here, we will be running, Mech Arms High Impact Drivers. Now, the High Impact Drivers, its main function is going to be giving the mech is going to be generating might from the mech, and is going to be one of the other ways that we keep our might up on this build. You wouldn't be wrong for taking Mech Arms Single Edge Cutters. The bleeding off this was really nice, but that said, there was no functional difference between these two when it came to the DPS. They evened out. So what that means is, if I want to be, giving out some might, then this is what I'm going to use. If I know I've got somebody with me that's giving me might, this is going to be a DPS increase. But with these builds, in a case like this, where I've got two traits that are kind of giving me the same basic output, what I'm actually going to do is default to the one that actually spreads that boon out on other people. We are going to be using Mech Frame Channeling Conduits. Unlocks the Mech Command skill Crisis Zone. Crisis Zone is how we are going to perma Alacrity on this build, and as I've mentioned, we will talk a whole lot more about Alacrity once we get to the gameplay section. Finally, Mech Core Barrier Engine unlocks the Mech Command skill Barrier Burst. While in combat, your mech will automatically generate a small amount of barrier every interval to nearby allies. Now, what is important is the way that this procs off this. Now, this procs when we give barrier, this gives us Alacrity when we are generating barrier. This generates barrier on a regular basis, so this is kind of the way that we're going to put together the three-part system of generating Alacrity perma on this build with, the gear setup that we're running. In terms of the bar down here, I went with full signets. Now, I went with full signets because very honestly, what I wanted was as simple as possible. I wanted kind of a low intensity build, if that's, your terminology of choice. It's not particularly a label I think is really applicable to a lot of things. But there we go. This is your low intensity version. If you're dealing with a lot of situations where you need to be healing other people, I would probably go at this point and change this to the healing turret, which offers healing, it offers regen, and it, I believe, offers a little bit of Condi coins as well. In terms of anything else here, I will only say that the build does kind of lack a little bit of CC. So if you're looking to kind of shore that up, you get a little bit of CC off Force Signet, but you don't want to be pressing this very often. This is kind of a, oh crap, CC. There are better options in Engineer's Toolkit for CC. We do, however, definitely want to keep Shift Signet. Now, Shift Signet is giving us movement speed, but more importantly, any boons you gain are copied to your mech. This is also going to be your stun break, and it's a stun break and shadow step, which is an interesting little combination. It may not be the most thematic thing on the elite spec, but it's not bad. It's not bad. And we're going to be running Superconducting Signet. Now, Superconducting Signet is non-negotiable. Unlike other signets, you're going to want to press this. It's a significant DPS bump, particularly if you are talking about situations where you're dealing with trash mobs, or any kind of pressure situation where you're hitting multiple enemies in AoEs. This is going to be a huge win for you. Superconducting Signet, I'm a big fan of. Use it offensively, unlike the rest of your signets. Now, with the rest of your signets, the Jade Buster Cannon from Overclock Signet. Now, Overclock Signet will bring our signets back quicker when we're using them. This is good in the case of, obviously, our heal and our little Condi Bomb here. But the big options here that you have are obviously the completely overpowered Supply Crate, which does heal, damage, daze. It's really, really kind of a completely stacked power. I really like it. But you also have the option of the Elite Mortar Kit. Let's talk a little bit about the build. The build doesn't come with any ranged options. You could play rifle on this. If you're gonna play rifle with this, you're gonna want to go and spec the whole thing for power and set it up a completely different way. It's kind of that simple. But running the Elite Mortar Kit is a great option when you are looking at situations where you need to do a little bit of ranged pressure. Examples of this might be, any kind of champion in Ekavald Forest or anywhere around with the inside-outside mechanic. I believe it's called a phase shifter that we saw on Desert Bounties. Absolutely decent tool for the job, but mostly I'm going to keep this here and just kind of mix it up in the middle of melee. So with all that said, hey, let's have a few moments and let's look at some fashion. I will say it right now, after calling in a mulligan on my last build video, I have cobbled together something I think is pretty decent in terms of our look for this character. I'm pretty happy with her. Obviously maybe not the best place to be standing for this, so let's go down here. And yeah, let's take a look. All right, pulling it up here, we will get into our wardrobe. And we are going to be using the Racing Helmet of the Renegade. The Racing Helmet, one of those pieces I'm particularly fond of. You get that from Beetle Racing. We are going to be using the holographic dragon shoulders of the Renegade. The holographic dragon shoulders are going to be achieved during Dragon Bash, the annual event, and those are a really nice piece, and I'm glad I finally found a way to put them into use. In terms of the chest piece, we are using the Runic Hunter Coat. The Runic Hunter Coat is gained from doing Icebrood Saga strikes. If you are doing those Icebrood Saga strikes and looking for what to do with your rewards, you will occasionally get pieces that can be actually traded in for the Runic Armor Set. The Runic Armor Set is absolutely fantastic. All three weights are, I'm a big fan. Going into the gloves are the Mechanist gloves. These are the gloves that you get for training up Mechanist. I'm a big fan of these. These are really, really nice, and they kind of fit with everything else. And finally, we will be using the Runic Hunter boots. Oh, the leggings. The leggings are the Triumphant leggings. You could probably just put anything under that, to be honest with you. And the boots are the Runic Hunter boots. Now, the reason I used the Runic was kind of bring in the kind of light blue. The reason I used the light blue, and we will take a look at that, is because in my weapons, I am using the Glitched Adventure Pistol, and in a lot of lighting that looks very similar. The Glitched Adventure Pistol gained during Super Adventure Box. I guess that's coming up fairly soon, or did I miss it? I don't know. Not my favorite festival, but I quite like that skin and bought it off the TP. In terms of the mace, I am going old school. I am going with the original Fixer Upper. which I just think really kind of suited that well. Let's go over to dyes at this point and take a look at our dyes. Now our dyes here are going to be primarily, I'm using a couple of different ones obviously on the helmet just to kind of set it aside. I'm using clay, gold fusion, and golden sheen, as well as green shade. On the shoulders I'm using golden lion, I'm using ghost, and I'm using breeze. I'm using breeze and ghost for the light and dark, or light and bright blues all over the outfit. For the whites, I am using guiding star. So that is our basic dye setup here. Also green shade on that. So that is the way it goes. Now, let me take a quick moment and say, hey, ArenaNet, wouldn't it be nice if I could dye my mech to match these colors? Wouldn't that be amazing? All right. I've had my soapbox moment. Let's go to the raid training area and see how this all comes together. Let's take a few minutes and talk about alacrity and boon duration and how to make a boon perma and what that means. Alacrity, first off, is a boon that we generate. The boon that we generate, it decreases the recharge time of our powers. That becomes obviously important because as our recharge time decreases, we can use our more powerful skills more often. That simple. It's a DPS increase overall. Probably one of the most important offensive boons in the game. Quickness, another one. 25 stacks of might being the third. Fury kind of dropping down on the list. But in terms of the most important offensive boons in the game, alacrity is pretty up there. Perma-ing alacrity obviously is a very desirable thing, and a character that can perma alacrity on its 5-man subgroup is going to be a highly prized thing. Not only is this going to increase your own quality of life in a group, it increases everybody's quality of life. So this becomes really important when we go into things like meta groups. It's also important if we take this character into, say, like a T1 fractal or a dungeon or something like that, or whatever we're doing, just derping around with our friends. So alacrity, obviously, we recognize its importance. We know how to generate it. We're going to generate it in 2 ways on this build, and let's definitely get into that and take a look. Now, the first way that we are going to be generating alacrity, okay, is when our robot attacks, because of the way that we have gone ahead and traded it. And if we take a look up here, we've got this green number here instead of the white number, which is telling us that the recharge time on our powers is being increased. We can see this right here as well. So this is telling us we are under the effect of alacrity. The alacrity, as you see it right now from the auto attacks on our robot, is barely permed. And when I say it's barely permed, occasionally it's dropping out. Now obviously this is not something that's preferred. We want that boon there at all times. So just plain auto attacking on this build, the way that we have it set up, is not going to perma alacrity. Perma being obviously that the boon is always there. So what do we do to perma alacrity? Well, the other thing that we did in the build here, all right, is we have Crisis Zone. And when we hit Crisis Zone and we are hitting it 100% off cooldown, we will just barely, the way this tune is set up, perma alacrity. That said, that means that we have to be on this cooldown at all times in order to perma it. The other thing that this means is that anybody who is stepping in and out of our kind of area where we're generating this boon is going to lose it at times. And that's the real world. There's, perma-ing alacrity in an environment like this, which is obviously, not very indicative of the real world. And then there's the real world where our friends are jumping around, right? And they're wiggling and stuff like that. And that's just how it goes. So what do we do to perma alacrity? Well, like I say, we can barely perma it this way by making sure we hit this off cooldown at all points. The other thing that we can do in order to give ourselves some breathing room on that is to start putting some boon duration on this tune. Now, that is why I touched on the Firebrand runes. The Firebrand runes absolutely help in terms of permitting that alacrity. The other thing we could do is swap out that strength sigil, and we could put a concentration sigil in there, which would give us another 10% boon duration. So with that, if we went with the Firebrand runes, we'd be getting another 20%. We could use food and utilities to further increase that concentration. But that said, this is a solo build, and I recognize that I can, at all points, hit Crisis Zone off cooldown, and particularly if I'm in metagroups, I'm not going to worry about the people jumping around, because people are going to jump around. I mean, it's that simple. They're going to be in and out. So that's kind of what we're getting at. If you're in one of those situations where it becomes absolutely crucial and you don't trust yourself to be hitting this off cooldown, starting to invest in some boon duration, either via your gear with the runes, like I mentioned, the Firebrand runes, or food, is absolutely going to put you where you need to be. So I just want to kind of get into that. I know this is super newbie stuff. If you're still watching, thanks. I hope you're new to the game. If you're still watching and you're rolling your eyes at me going, why are you doing this? Well, this is a very entry level build. So looking ahead now, Crisis Zone, obviously, if we're hitting this off cooldown, the way that this build is set up, without food, we will perma alacrity, but we've got absolutely zero room for error on that in order to permit, and in order to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room, we'll start investing in boon duration at that point, at the cost, obviously, of our DPS. So with that said, let's set our golem up and let's go through a few of the basics of this build. There isn't a whole lot else to talk about, to be honest with you. I'm going to spawn a golem. All right, it's going to be average, he's going to be weak, and we will please spawn said golem, and there he is. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to walk up here and start hitting my powers off cooldown. I'm going to save the 3, okay? The 3 is a stun, so I'm going to save the 3 for break bar. But the 3 also is burning. Now, it's got a fairly short cooldown, and if we're permaing alacrity, obviously that's going to be a much shorter cooldown. So we've got a window to use this. The other thing that this is doing is putting burning down, and that can be important, regarding our traits. So there's that. 1 and 2, I'm going to absolutely hit these off cooldown. These are beautiful things. Also going to hit the 4, so the pistol skill off cooldown. And if you remember our traits, we've got a trait that will absolutely bump our damage when we are putting down multiple conditions on a foe, in which case I will put some immob and some cripple down with the glue shot. The glue shot's also just, I'll be straight with you guys, one of those things I love about Engineer. It's like all these wacky Looney Tunes things. And really that's it. Since we don't get a weapon swap, we do also, though, want to worry about these skills off here. And I'm going to be honest with you, hitting these off cooldown was just fine. And this is where we will get some Aegis, as well as a little bit of stability. And we will be getting alacrity on that. It's actually a fair bit of stability if you take a look at it, so keep that in mind. Stability, obviously, I think I've banged this drum one too many times on this channel. If you can get stab, and love stab. So there is a whole lot of stability for you guys. And that's kind of the way it comes. And if you take a look here, it's starting to dissipate the alacrity. I'm just about here, and there it's back full. And that's our margin of error, the way that this build is set up. So, that's a fairly wordy way of saying things. I hope, I didn't kind of bombard you there, but I think that that's an important thing to realize, not only the value of the skill, but ways to give ourselves a little bit of breathing space when we're talking about permeating a boon. In terms of the bar over here, I'm going to hit the heal skill, obviously, when I want to, and I'm actually going to hit Superconducting Signet pretty much off cooldown. The only other thing to keep in mind is this one, which is the break bar hate, and we'll get into our break bar here. So in terms of break bar on this build, it's all fairly self-explanatory. We will get a fair bit of break bar off the pistol on the 5. We'll see that coming down really quickly there. That's a pretty nice amount of CC. We've got a fair bit off the 4 signet. That said, this is not a signet that we want to be using as much as possible, but there we go. That's also going to give us some breathing room. Let's give a couple of seconds for that to come back. And finally, our last CC option is going to come off Mace 3. If we take a look at that, that's going to dump Burning and a little bit of Daze down. That is pretty powerful. We got to be happy with that. So we've got the ability to take a fairly, weak break bar down. It's not among the best break bar in the game, but understanding where your break bar is obviously really important. And should that fail, I guess go out and get one of those way stations. I don't know. I think it's in an okay place. I'm not going to complain about it too much. And that's it, folks. This would be Celestial Mechanist. It's a huge amount of fun. Easily the biggest surprise of the X-Pack, and one of the places that I'm going to eat my words. One of the other ones is the fishing. Man, I thought that fishing was... No, that fishing sucks. Hey, thank you very much for making it to the end of this video. I am going to remind you to have fun in game and min-max your real life. I'm glad we took this moment. We'll see you next time.